Hugo, I think the first thing is when we analyze variants, it's not necessarily to cause a scare amongst the public. Remember that all viruses actually do mutate. The only thing is because COVID-19 has been declared a public health emergency of international concern, there's a lot of amount of time that is spent on surveying the specific virus. And so we pick up on the viruses much faster. What we do know is there are various variants that fit into various categories. There are those that we call variants of just interest, where we can see that it is actually causing a bit more cases, and due to the changes in the virus, it spreads more rapidly. And then we have those that are called variants of concern. And those are ones who spread faster and also cause more disease. And then there's variants of high consequence, which are the ones where not only do they spread faster, but also they cause more disease. And the current existing medical intervention that we have is not really sufficient. So with regards to the new strains in India, just like the one in the UK and also in South Africa, they've now been classified as borderline variants of interest, but now are going more into variants of concern because of the high level of transmissibility that we are finding within the communities at this moment in time. Of course, research is still ongoing for us to really understand just whether or not it would be responsive to the current vaccine and the extent of mortality that it will actually cause as well as morbidity.
My next question is really around policy and certainly your opinion on it. A few days ago, there was talk about blood clots being caused by a specific vaccine, and immediately government reacted and said we stop in the rollout. Now, it is clear that there is a variant in India, and this variant is multiplying or is affecting hundreds of thousands of people every single day. Yet we have not made a call on it because we're still researching.
Okay, so first of all, I think what we need to understand is what we're seeing with the third wave in India. Is it's basically a accumulation of the various stages that have taken place in the first and the second. India did not just wake up and suddenly find itself in this situation. There's cumulative factors. Of course, the fatigue around following the correct non-pharmaceutical measures, which is wearing your masks, your hand hygiene, your social distancing. We know that India is quite a highly populous country as well. And then, of course, again, having a health system that is not necessarily ready to manage high levels of infections that rise after the endemic period. Endemic period is when you basically have low-lying levels of the infection, but it's not causing severe spread as we're seeing at this moment in time. So in response to, surely we can see this in India, why South Africa not having a knee-jerk approach. I think the reason why we're being cautious is because of the fact that we look at multiple variables. By the time you see something in media, it has been going through a specific epidemiological journey. It didn't just start at this moment in time. And with regards to the vaccines that were stopped, I think it was good to be prudent because remember, at the end of the day, as a National Department of Health, your overall mandate is safety and security of the general public. And even if the incidence of the clotting took place, it was still good to just have a pause look and really see, should we continue with the study and then afterwards decide on implementation. And I think they've acted swiftly. As you know, there's going to be a national rollout amongst the population from the 15th of May, and the Sasonke trial is just about to finish on the 13th. So I think they have really acted the way they ought to act. What I'm most concerned about now is whether or not the public is actually going to go out and get vaccinations, because due to the scare of the clots, a lot of people are opting out. And that's exactly what we don't need, because we need to get herd immunity. We can't have as many people vaccinated and being able to manage the infection if they do get it in such a way that it doesn't cause catastrophe.
Now, when we talk about these variants, do they put pressure on the vaccine rollout? How will they impact the vaccine rollout? Do we wait for information to come through, or do we carry on as planned?
So the uncertainty on the vaccines and whether or not they'll actually work on the various variants could put pressure if we're going to wait for thorough investigations and research to take place. Remember, research takes place over a long period of time. So we need to use what we have. And currently we know that the existing vaccines have been proven to work, so we need to continue. What will happen thanks to modern technology is already, because we've got vector vaccines, you'll utilize whatever variants that you see that then create boosters and so forth. if you need an adjunct to the current vaccines that will then be given. I think what is also important, and this is what we always say about health, it doesn't only lie on the responsibility of National Department of Health, Provincial Department of Health, and the scientists, but even ourselves as well. We need to be socially responsible. So we know what works currently, and that is put on your mask, social distance. It's tempting to go outside and be out for long periods of time. It's tempting to actually sit outside in pubs, etc. But we need to be socially responsible and know how we are actually going to assist the health system so that it doesn't collapse. Because we know that the more number of infections you have, the higher the variance, because the more the virus has to replicate. And that's how we get mutations. So how can we as a society and a population prevent that? We need to really stay at home. We need to adhere to all the requirements that have been asked of us. And also, please do get vaccinated. It's the only chance we have now to try and have herd immunity. Will it work 100%? We are working with a novel virus in a global pandemic. It was never planned for. So nothing is actually 100% at this moment in time, but we need to utilize the information that we have at this moment in time, evidence that we have at this moment in time.
Well, those magic words, get vaccinated, are the source of my next question. We have noticed, certainly read in the media, that certain individuals are crossing over into Zimbabwe to get vaccinated. What are your thoughts on that?
We need to really be patient, and we need to be social responsible as well. We know that the low middle income countries throughout Africa have really struggled to get access to vaccinations, and countries are really working hard to negotiate with other countries that may have vaccines in access. And I think if you take from others, we're not really being fair. I think the rollout will take place, and we need to just really do the social responsible thing. And another thing is this also speaks to various things, Hugo, not only with the vaccinations. We see instances where, it will either be various citizens coming in to other countries for access to your ARVs and other medication. It makes it incredibly difficult from a planning perspective because it is only an X amount of budget for X number of people that we can account for from a census perspective. So I think it is not a responsible thing to do. It certainly isn't a collegial thing to do. We need to use the resources and allow the government to actually plan accordingly and wait. And what we need to do is the vaccine is not the answer to all. I think the panic that people are having is if you're vaccinated, you can go out and walk around without a mask and finally live, but that's not the case. Having a vaccination is only one of the adjuncts to continue with the normal precautions that we've been practicing from the beginning. So this is what we need to do at this moment in time.
But I suppose it might seem a little unfair, certainly when you suggest that people should be patient and play the waiting game. Nobody really wants to dice with their lives, in all fairness, and many citizens have been waiting for months for the vaccine rollout to take place, and smaller countries with smaller budgets seem to be racing way ahead of a giant like South Africa, and we expect people to play the waiting game?
So Hugo, I understand the sentiments that you're having, but we're not just saying have the waiting game only. You need to still continue to practice the basic precautions. Remember, currently we're still in study phases to actually see the efficacy of the virus and also the vaccine against the virus itself. So it's not that we are 100% sure that if you do get vaccinated, you'll be overall protected.
Sorry, Doctor, can I just come in there and interject? And the reason I do is because multiple nations across the globe are not playing a waiting game. They're going ahead and vaccinating their nationals. The U.S. in the first 100 days that President Biden was in office vaccinated more than 100 million individuals. We seem to be the only ones that are waiting, studying, and waiting some more.
So, Hugo, remember America and also the other first world countries belong to what we called the AMC group. And that is the group that then managed to procure the vaccines much earlier than anybody else. They actually had the value, the monetary capability to say, right, we need you to create various pharmaceutical companies. We need you to create vaccines. So therefore, we're going to put money into you creating those studies. Remember at the beginning, manufacturing companies couldn't come up with vaccines quite rapidly because they didn't want to create a vaccine that nobody would utilize. And then afterwards, through the COVAX, the low-middle income countries then came on board. And I think that's always been the plight, is why is it that low-middle income countries couldn't be afforded a different model in which they could get access to the vaccine? So I think we need to look at the background of the context of how it is that certain things come into the country, and particularly the continent of Africa. And I love what you're saying, because it looks like, but why is it that we're always left behind? Yet we keep saying that the ethos of global healthcare is leave no one behind. And this is a discourse we need to have at a different time. But as a public health medicine specialist who's really also been at the forefront of, the vaccine rollout, etc., I'm quite appreciative of the fact that, we didn't necessarily have a budget from the beginning. We had to procure one. It was quite clever for African African countries to then come together and say, look, we are lagging behind because of the monetary component. Let's put money together and then have more muscle to be able to get the vaccines through the African Union, and we could see changes occurring. So basically, that's exactly what's happening at this moment in time. I wish one could say that we were completely in the lull, but that also would not be true. When you look at the overall dynamics and the politics behind global access, when you have a situation like we have at this moment in time, and I think South Africa did respond appropriately to it.
Dr. Majake, my final question. Winter's upon us and potentially the third wave, different set of problems. How do we deal with them, certainly for those of us at home?
Absolutely, and I think the challenging thing about winter is that you can still have basic flu, but we all know that the anxiety is everybody's going to assume that it's COVID. So first of all, do get your flu vaccination. You can still get that. You can get your COVID vaccine 14 days after your flu vaccine, so there's still enough time for the population to do that. Secondly, you need to continue to adhere to your non-pharmaceutical practices, as we've said. Be socially responsible. Stay at home. Pretend it's still level 5, even if we're level 1 at this moment in time, because we are dealing with something that the globe is still looking at. Scientists are constantly monitoring. And I'm sure we're still going to have much more discourse on this. So this is what we need to do at this moment in time. But also, what is important is we need to understand that we're not completely helpless. So various things like your immunity boosters, etc., are some of the interventions that we can also utilize at this moment in time.
Dr. Majake, thank you so much for speaking to us, and enjoy the rest of your Mother's Day.